The message came while I was restocking candle shelves at my artisan home goods store, my little slice of peace on Maple Street, known to locals as Hearth. We were prepping for the weekend rush, and I had a candle in one hand and a barcode scanner in the other when my phone vibrated. It was a text. From my husband. I'm leaving you. Moving to Phoenix with Rachel. Already drained our joint account. Don't wait up. That emoji was what did it. Not the betrayal. Not the financial gut punch. The smug little laugh at the end. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. I finished scanning the last candle, placed it on the shelf, and smiled at a customer who was debating between coastal driftwood and winter figure after ringing up her purchase and wrapping it carefully in tissue paper. I excused myself to the back office. I closed the door. Sat down. Typed a single word reply. Congratulations. Then I put my phone on silent and returned to work. My name is Natalie Kerr, I'm 37 years old, and up until that moment, I had been married for almost 11 years to a man who couldn't even face me in person. A man who had the audacity to run off with someone he met at a wine bar networking event and break our marriage with a text and a joke. But what Jacob didn't know, as he laughed with Rachel on his way to the desert, was that I'd seen it coming. And I had prepared accordingly. The red flags started small, like they always do. The sudden obsession with fitness, the longer client dinners that didn't line up with his calendar, the odd secrecying around his phone. Then there were the receipts, first a fancy sushi place I'd never heard of, then a spa visit we certainly hadn't booked together. I confronted him once. He brushed it off. Networking, babe. You wouldn't get it. He was right. I didn't get it. I was too busy running a business I built from the ground up. Too busy pouring my energy into something real to chase empty status dinners and vague networking. But I'm not naive. I hired an accountant. Quietly opened a separate business account. Shifted Hearth's finances into that account. Labeled everything. Itemized everything. I even froze a dormant line of credit we'd once considered using for renovations. 6 weeks before the text came, I changed the locks on our safe. Not because I was certain, but because my gut whispered, he's preparing to leave, and he's going to take more than just his suits. He thought he was clever. But I was careful. Hours after the text, I was home. In the same house we'd shared for almost a decade, though it had been mine long before he moved in. I had inherited it from my aunt, an old craftsman cottage I'd lovingly restored room by room. Jacob had never been added to the deed, despite his many passive-aggressive suggestions over the years. This would really feel like our home, he'd said once. I smiled. It already is. I poured a glass of chilled white wine, the good bottle I'd been saving, and sat on the back porch. Cicadas buzzed in the twilight, and the scent of fresh rosemary drifted from the herb pots lining the railing. I opened my laptop and logged into my business portal. Everything was secure. Then I called my attorney. You ready? She asked. He just made his move, I replied. I'll file first thing in the morning, she said. Do you want me to send a process server? Eventually, I said. Let him think he's won first. He texted again later that night. You'll be okay. Heart's always been your thing. I'll let you keep it. No hard feelings. My thing? I nearly choked on my wine. Hearth wasn't just a boutique, it was a thriving, award-winning business with a loyal customer base and a six-figure annual profit. I built it during lunch breaks from my day job, sourcing candles, ceramics, and handmade decor. I launched the e-store myself. Taught myself photography for product shots. Learned bookkeeping the hard way. And now, the man who once called it my hobby thought he was letting me keep it? I didn't respond. Instead, I took screenshots. Each text was another gift to my legal case. Rachel's different, Nat. She understands me. You just stopped caring. Click. Save. Can't believe you're not even fighting for me. Just proves we drifted apart. Click. Save. Every word was a testament to his narcissism. And every word would help ensure he didn't walk away with a cent more than he was legally entitled to. The next morning, I called the bank. I need to report fraudulent withdrawals on a joint account, I said. Do you have documentation? I do. Including a text where he brags about emptying it and funding a move with his girlfriend. The agent was quiet for a beat, then said, please forward that to our legal team. We'll begin the freeze and reversal process immediately. By noon, Jacob's fantasy of a carefree move to Phoenix with Rachel was interrupted. The card was frozen. The withdrawal flagged. The airline tickets he'd booked? Reversed. I could only imagine the look on his face at the check-in counter. He texted again, this time angry. Did you really cancel the cards? What's your problem? No reply. He tried again. We're at the airport. Our hotel says the reservation is gone. Don't be petty, Nat. This isn't attractive. Still no reply. Instead, I updated my lawyer. I want every message printed, organized, and added to our filing. Already done, she replied. That night, I locked up Hearth with a quiet satisfaction that I hadn't felt in months. Not because Jacob was gone, but because he had no idea what was coming. Saturday mornings at Hearth were usually busy with regulars, women from around the neighborhood browsing handmade pottery, couples shopping for gifts, the occasional influencer snapping a photo beside the support local, breathe deeper wall art. But this Saturday felt different. Maybe it was because I'd slept soundly for the first time in months. Maybe it was because I'd finally blocked Jacob's number after receiving one too many "you're being dramatic" texts. Or maybe it was because I knew, for the first time in a long time, that I had all the power. The boutique doors opened at 9 a.m. sharp, and customers flooded in. I smiled, offered candle samples, wrapped purchases in our signature cream and gold paper. Meanwhile, my lawyer was doing her work behind the scenes. By 10:30 a.m., she called. Emergency hearing is set for Tuesday, she said. We're filing to freeze all assets immediately. Given the text admissions, credit card abuse, and what he did with the joint account, the judge will take our side. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Let him think he is relaxing in Phoenix for a few more days. She chuckled. Actually, he's not in Phoenix anymore. I raised an eyebrow. What? His girlfriend's social media is doing a lot of the legwork. Looks like the hotel booted them after the payment bounced. They're in some motel near the airport now. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered the text he sent the night before. You'll regret making this so ugly. I was trying to be generous. The man drained our account, ran off with a woman barely out of college, and claimed he was the generous one. The entitlement. The delusion. It was laughable, except it wasn't funny. Not when so many women I knew had been in my shoes, underestimated, undermined, then gaslit into thinking their grief was irrational. So I did what any self-respecting woman would do. I turned up the music in the store, moved the seasonal throws to the front display, and put out a sign. End of season sale, time to clear the air. A few hours later, Jacob's mother called. Natalie, dear. I just spoke to Jacob. He said you're causing some kind of legal trouble. Is that true? I had her on speaker as I knotted ribbons around handmade soap bars. Did he mention emptying our joint account and charging thousands of dollars on our credit card for a romantic getaway? She hesitated. Well, he said you were controlling, that you always made him feel small. Would you like me to read his texts aloud? The one where he gloats about leaving me? The one where he calls Hearth my little hobby and tells me I'll be fine in my old age? A long pause. Well, maybe he wasn't very sensitive about it. I appreciate the call, Mrs. Kerr, but my lawyers advised I limit contact with Jacob and his family. I'll let you go now. Click. I didn't feel angry. I felt awake. Awake in a way I hadn't been in years. Jacob's collapse wasn't sudden, it was gradual, like wet cardboard peeling apart in the rain. But now that it was happening, it was accelerating. By Sunday afternoon, I had 3 emails from women I barely knew, co-workers of his, an ex-girlfriend of Rachel's, someone who'd once worked in the same department. Each offered receipts of his behavior, screenshots, awkward messages, even a few suggestive DMs sent to co-workers after hours. My lawyer loved it. She sent over a draft of our petition to freeze assets, claiming premeditated financial misconduct, with attachments of his texts, bank withdrawals, and credit card receipts. That night, Jacob tried again. You think you're smart, but I made copies of all your business stuff. Hearth grew while we were married. I'm entitled to half. I laughed. Out loud. Alone on my couch with a mug of tea and a blanket on my lap. He thought that threatening me with my own records would intimidate me. I forwarded the message to my lawyer and added it to the file labeled, Jacob's Implosion, Exhibit A to Z. Tuesday morning, the emergency hearing began in a gray courtroom filled with a kind of fluorescent lighting that made even the wood paneling look cheap. Jacob showed up late, wearing sunglasses indoors and a too tight black polo shirt like he was auditioning for a reality show about midlife disasters. Rachel wasn't with him. Rumor was, she'd gone back to her parents' place. I sat quietly next to my lawyer, who had a 3-inch binder of color-coded documentation in front of her. The judge asked Jacob to explain his withdrawals. "I was making a clean break," he said confidently. "Just trying to move on. It wasn't malicious." The judge's eyebrows lifted. "Using a shared credit card to pay for a romantic vacation with another woman isn't malicious?" Jacob blinked. "I mean, she was leaving me anyway." "No," the judge cut him off. "She wasn't. And even if she had been, that doesn't entitle you to clear the bank account." Jacob's lawyer fumbled through a defense, claiming that Harth's success had ballooned during their marriage and therefore he was owed a share. My lawyer slid our records across the table: premarital business license, financial statements, tax filings, every receipt marked clearly as separate from marital funds. She even included Jacob's texts where he mocked the shop and called it her little side hustle. The judge skimmed the documents and sighed. "Mr. Kerr," he said, "you can't insult the business in one breath and claim ownership in the next. You'll return the funds, or we'll issue a lien on your personal assets." Jacob paled. "But they're gone. We spent most of it." "Then I suggest," the judge said coldly, "you figure out how to get it back." By the time we exited the courthouse, Jacob's sunglasses were tucked in his pocket, and his shoulders were slumped like a teenager grounded for the first time. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That part of my life, being his wife, being the second character in a story he thought he was writing, was done. And this next chapter? It belonged to me. The days after the hearing passed like a sunrise in reverse, light creeping into all the dark corners Jacob had tried to leave behind. He was quiet. Too quiet. No texts, no rage messages, no pitying manipulations. Just silence. The kind that usually comes when someone finally realizes their plan has detonated in their own hands. Meanwhile, I was busy. Harth didn't slow down just because my ex-husband was hiding from creditors and reality. In fact, if anything, business boomed. Maybe it was the way local gossip spread like wildfire. Maybe it was word-of-mouth support from the women who'd watch me hold steady, unmoved, while a man tried to burn my life down with an emoji. Or maybe it was something simpler: people love watching a woman win on her own terms. Customers started visiting not just to shop, but to talk. A mother and daughter came in one afternoon, both recently divorced, whispering, "We just wanted to see what strength looks like in person." A university professor sent her graduate students to observe Harth as a case study in business independence. A former co-worker of Jacob's emailed anonymously to say, "Thank you for reminding all of us that quiet isn't weak." It wasn't long before the local paper reached out. They wanted to do a feature, not about the divorce, not about how she got revenge, but about the business. About how Harth had expanded through intentional growth, how it had gone from a local candle shop to a multi-location boutique with custom furniture, handmade goods, and a thriving e-commerce wing. I said yes. Because they finally saw me, not just the shadow he tried to cast. The article ran with a photo of me standing in front of our flagship store, wind tugging at my blazer, sunlight catching the gold-foiled Harth sign behind me. The headline read, "Natalie Kerr, building a brand, not just surviving a storm." It went viral. At least locally. Suddenly, I wasn't just a woman who got out. I was a woman who stood up, stayed calm, and built something stronger from the rubble. And that, more than anything, made Jacob spiral. It started with a call to my attorney. "He's filed a motion," she said flatly. "Wants to reopen negotiations." I didn't even blink. "On what grounds?" "He's claiming that since your business gained notoriety after the separation, it's now a marital windfall and he deserves a portion." I actually laughed. "A marital windfall? Is that a legal term or a fantasy he wrote on a cocktail napkin?" She chuckled too. "Don't worry. We'll shut it down." His last motion was denied before the ink dried. Still, it amazed me. Even now, after the hearing, after the rulings, after the judge had made it abundantly clear he had no legal leg to stand on, Jacob was still trying to insert himself into my success. Like a ghost in the photos of a housewarming party he was never invited to. But here's the thing, ghosts don't scare you when you know they can't touch you anymore. A week later, he tried calling my store. Amanda, my assistant manager and low-key guardian angel, answered. "Harth Boutique, this is Amanda." Long pause. "Is Natalie available?" "Who's calling?" "Her husband." Amanda didn't flinch. She told me about it later, over after-hours wine while we were unpacking a shipment of hand-woven rugs. "I told him," she said, "you don't have a husband. Just a name we use for training stories." I burst out laughing. Please tell me you actually said that. Word for word. We clinked glasses. Then came the next unexpected twist. Melissa walked into the store. Not Rachel, the wine bar goddess he left me for. Melissa, the receptionist from his old office. The one before Rachel. We hadn't seen each other in years. She looked different now, older, sharper around the edges, like life had taught her some hard lessons she didn't see coming. I was organizing a display of woven throw pillows when she approached. Hi, she said cautiously. Melissa, I replied, voice calm, unreadable. I just wanted to say. I saw the article. About you. About Hearth. I nodded. You probably don't care, but. I believed him. Back then. When he said you were cold, controlling. When he told everyone you didn't understand him. I stayed silent. I get it now. I do. He told me the same things later. When I started asking about rent, about how he was going to pay back the money he borrowed, about his job. Suddenly, I was the cold one. The controlling one. She looked down. I broke up with him after he tried to use my credit card to buy a plane ticket to Vegas. I blinked. Vegas? For a business retreat. It was a poker tournament. I couldn't help it, I snorted. Anyway, she said softly, I'm sorry. I thought you should hear that from me. I nodded. Thank you. Then, after a beat, want a candle? We just got a new line in, lavender and eucalyptus. She smiled, the kind that meant thank you for not making this harder than it had to be. She left with 2 candles and a book of matches in a linen bag. As she walked out, Amanda whispered, was that Melissa? I nodded. That was another woman who escaped a man who thought he was the sun. By the time summer rolled in, Hearth had expanded into a second location downtown. The online store was thriving. I hired a brand strategist, 2 new part-time associates, and a local ceramics artist whose pieces now sold faster than we could stock them. But more than the growth, what mattered was the quiet revolution happening behind the scenes. I was getting emails, letters, handwritten notes from women across the country. I read about your business and your story. It made me leave. You inspired me to register my own LLC. I opened a separate account. Just in case. They weren't stories of rage. They were stories of preparation. Of clarity. Of women choosing self-preservation over pleasing someone else. One evening, I walked into my office and stared at the framed screenshot above my desk, the one with Jacob's original text. Have fun with your little store. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age, smiley face emoji. Below it now hung a new edition. A plaque from the state's Women in Business Summit. Hearth Boutique, Outstanding Leadership and Resilience, 2023. I stood there for a long time, letting the silence swell like applause. Not from anyone else. But for myself. The woman who didn't just survive a betrayal. She rewrote the whole damn narrative. There's a moment every builder knows, a quiet breath between the hustle and the bloom, when you stop just long enough to realize, I built this. It was a Wednesday morning, just past 7 a.m., when that moment arrived for me. I was sitting in the back patio of my third boutique, Hearth North, overlooking rows of freshly planted succulents lining the perimeter. A soft jazz playlist played overhead while the team unpacked a new shipment of hand-poured candles. The aroma of bergamot and cedar floated through the air like punctuation on a chapter I didn't realize I'd finished writing. 3 locations. 37 employees. An online storefront with national orders. And peace. Not revenge. Not rage. Not the hollow satisfaction of winning against someone who tried to erase me. Just peace. Jacob, on the other hand, had become a cautionary tale, an anecdote whispered between HR meetings and coffee shop meetups. He had moved, again. This time to a friend's guest house, according to Amanda, who still somehow managed to keep her ear to the ground. He applied for a job at a competitor, she told me over kombucha one afternoon. Didn't get it. They Googled him. Apparently, Hearth's viral rise had left more than inspiration in its wake. It had left a trail, an unignorable contrast between a woman who thrived after betrayal and a man still clawing at the remnants of the life he thought he could control. I didn't gloat. Not because I was noble. But because I genuinely didn't care anymore. That, I had come to learn, was the most powerful shift of all. It was around that time that invitations began arriving. Business conferences. Women's empowerment panels. Editorial interviews. Not about heartbreak. Not even about Hearth. But about systems. Structure. Strategy. How did you protect yourself financially? What's your advice to women mixing marriage and entrepreneurship? What's the one decision you're most grateful for? I always gave the same answer. Preparation is not paranoia. It's peace of mind. And then I'd show them my process, how I'd separated my personal and business accounts, how I documented everything, how I never gave in to guilt when it came to protecting what I built. And the part that surprised most people? I didn't make those decisions because I was afraid Jacob might betray me. I made them because I respected myself enough not to gamble with my future. One morning, I was at the warehouse, finalizing a shipment list, when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the message was familiar. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm sorry. Jacob. After months of silence, I messed everything up. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. You always believed in things that mattered. I read the message twice. Then once more. Not out of emotion, but out of awe. This was the man who'd once called me boring. Who'd told his friends that Hearth was just a way for her to keep busy, who laughed as he drained our account, thinking I'd crumple like unpaid receipts. Now he was sending what sounded like a eulogy to a version of himself that no longer existed. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because some stories don't need sequels. I screenshotted the message, saved it to a folder titled Final Proof, and then closed the app. That Friday, Melissa came by Hearth North. Not the receptionist-turned-girlfriend Rachel, but Melissa, the last in a long line of women Jacob tried to bend around his empty charm. She'd started her own social media consulting business and now worked with local boutiques. This was her third visit, and something about her felt brighter this time, like she was finally walking without carrying the weight of guilt she didn't deserve. I signed my first solo contract last week, she said, her eyes gleaming. That's amazing, I said, wrapping a custom planner for her. She held it close. You know, I tell your story to almost every client I meet. I smiled. You mean our story? She paused. He reached out to me too. Few months ago. Wanted to catch up. I told him I didn't recognize the man who texted me. I nodded, heart swelling with a strange sense of sisterhood. Neither do I. We hugged before she left, two women once caught in the same storm, now thriving on different shores. Later that evening, I returned to my flagship store. It was Hearth's 5th anniversary, and we were hosting a celebration. Balloons and muted pastels floated near the ceiling. Customers, friends, and fellow entrepreneurs filled the space. There were tiny champagne bottles, cupcakes branded with the Hearth logo, and photo walls decorated with prints from our earliest days. And right in the center, on the feature wall, the framed screenshot. Have fun with your little shop. Below it now hung a brass plate, freshly engraved. Her empire was never little. She just hadn't finished building it yet. That wall had become something of a pilgrimage for visitors. Not for bitterness, but for belief. A reminder that you didn't need to yell, or break, or even explain. You just needed to build. And to keep building. No matter who tried to tell you your story was over. By the time the crowd had thinned and the lights dimmed, I was standing at the checkout counter, sipping a final glass of champagne, when Amanda walked up with her signature mischievous grin. Guess who tried to RSVP to the party? I raised an eyebrow. Jacob. I almost spit my drink. He emailed the press contact on the website asking if he could drop by. Said he was feeling nostalgic. I laughed until my stomach hurt. What did you say? I didn't, she said. I just updated the spam filter. We toasted to that. That night, as I sat in the quiet of my living room, bare feet tucked under me and a new candle burning on the windowsill, I opened my notebook. Page 1, Hearth, Business Plan, Year 1. Page 53, Expansion Ideas. Page 122, Legacy Goals. I flipped to a new page and wrote in bold ink. Power built in peace. Not revenge. Not drama. Not a storm in his direction. Just the steady, grounded, unapologetic decision to keep going. To grow. To thrive. Because in the end, the real revenge was never about what Jacob lost. It was about what I never let him take. 5 years after the text that should have broken me, but instead ignited something indestructible, I stood in front of a sold-out ballroom. The audience was a mix of small business owners, hopeful entrepreneurs, and young women with notebooks open on their laps. The keynote topic read, Sustainable Success, Building Without Burning Out. But that wasn't the only reason they were here. They wanted the story. The one they'd heard whispers of online, seen headlines about in women's magazines, the woman whose husband left her via text and tried to steal her future, and who turned it all into an empire. They wanted proof that you could survive betrayal and build brilliance in its place. I smiled as I stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, my heels clicking softly against the polished wood. I wasn't always the person you see standing here, I began. Once, I was someone who believed I had to prove my worth in silence. Who thought love was compromise, even when it cost me my voice. Who mistook being ignored for being respected. The room stilled. But that changed the day I got a text that said, "Have fun with your little shop." A few quiet gasps rippled through the room. And then, a smile formed on my face. And so I did. Laughter. Warm, wholehearted, knowing. I went on to tell the story, not the dramatic bits, not the courtroom blow-by-blows, but the parts that mattered. How I protected my business by keeping records, creating separation between love and legalities. How I didn't let my grief become a spectacle, but a strategy. How I refused to engage in revenge and instead invested that energy into growth, into vision, into me. And most importantly, how I redefined what strength looked like, not as shouting in the boardroom or slamming doors, but as showing up every single day, steady and clear. When I stepped off stage to a standing ovation, the line to speak with me lasted nearly an hour. They brought books for me to sign, small business brochures for me to bless with encouragement, tears they'd held back for years. "I needed to hear this," a woman said, clutching my hand. "I'm still married. But I've been scared to even imagine what happens if it ends." "You don't have to fear the end," I said gently. "If you're prepared, it's just the beginning of your own chapter." Back in my office, tucked behind the original Hearth store, I kept two things side by side on the wall. The first, a framed screenshot of Jacob's original text, the one that tried to define my downfall. The second, a note written in purple ink on a thank you card from a 23-year-old woman who had attended my very first workshop. "Thank you for showing me that preparation is power. I opened my own shop last year, with separate accounts and contracts. You taught me how to trust myself." That card meant more than any press article. More than the revenue reports. More than the shiny Entrepreneur of the Year award on the nearby shelf. Because that card meant legacy. Jacob still lived somewhere on the fringes of my story, rumored to be managing a struggling home electronics outlet in a strip mall 2 towns over. According to a friend of a friend, he'd aged hard. The Vegas dreams were long gone. The young women who once found him charming now saw him for what he was, a man who thought charisma was a replacement for consistency. He had attempted another legal petition a year prior, claiming his involvement in emotional support during my business's early years entitled him to a cut of the Hearth franchise. It was denied before it even reached a hearing. His lawyer, his third since the divorce, quietly stepped away after that. I heard from his mother one last time. She came into the shop on a rainy Tuesday, unannounced, carrying an umbrella and a box of lemon cookies. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "For what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "For teaching him a lesson the rest of us never could," she said. "He still doesn't get it. But we do." She left the cookies and didn't stay long. I sent the box to the break room. No bitterness. No story to retell. Just another sign that the past had nowhere left to sit in my present. When Hearth launched its 5th store location, I brought Ezra, the college intern who had started as our part-time candle wrapper, to the ribbon cutting. He was now our marketing director, full-time, leading a team of 4. "I still remember when you made me handwrite our first client thank you notes," he said, laughing. "I thought you were being extra." I grinned. "You thought right. But extra is how we got here." We toasted sparkling cider in mismatched glasses and walked through the store's new scent section, designed in collaboration with a female-led essential oils company I'd invested in. Every corner of the boutique echoed women's stories, the weavers, the glassblowers, the single mothers who sent samples from their home kitchens. We had built something real. Something unapologetically ours. Not out of spite. But from intention. From peace. Sometimes I still get asked, "Do you ever wonder what he thinks of all this?" I always answer the same way. No. Because it's not his story anymore. And truly, it isn't. This life, these shops, these speaking engagements, these late nights filled with creativity instead of crisis, they're not a reaction to his betrayal. They're the result of something I always had but had forgotten to claim. Agency. Clarity. Power. Not loud power. Not vengeful power. Steady. Quiet. Whole. The kind that doesn't crumble when someone leaves. The kind that grows roots. At the 10-year anniversary of Hearth, I gave a toast in the courtyard of the original store. The air was warm. The string lights twinkled above tables lined with staff, partners, customers turned friends. In the distance, the candle shelves still flickered with soft scents, amber, rosewood, rosemary. I raised my glass. To every woman who was told she was being dramatic. To every woman who was told she was lucky to be tolerated. To every woman who was told her business was just a hobby, her ambition too much, her strength too quiet. Everyone lifted their glasses. And to the man who told me to have fun with my little shop, I did. I still am. Laughter. Cheers. Applause. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Because the world was already listening.